Good morning. Good morning. Here we go. What a very beautiful wet Friday we have. Sure, yeah, in Krugersdorp it's been raining all night. I don't know, it started somewhere, I don't even know what time, but around 8 o'clock or so, and it hasn't stopped. So really amazing. But good morning, welcome. Really privileged this morning. We have back the one and only, as I said on my WhatsApp, Mr. Hugo van Zyl, all the way from Dubai this morning. And today we're going to be talking about retirement funds and immigration, but the practical aspects. There are things that, like we all know what was said in the new legislation and the proposals and all of it. But how does it work practically? And I've spoken to quite a few financial advisors who's really run into some issues around how we get this done practically, how it is treated by the insurance companies and investment houses and so forth. And obviously then there's SARS and all of the other things that go with that. So really happy to have Hugo back this morning. And he is our resident tax person, professional. I think if you looked at the description, you would have seen his experience and, that he immigrated the first person long ago, even before there was a name for this. So really happy to have Hugo back. And then, of course, today, lekker, we've got Mr. David Kopp back. And going to the new studio in a second. And then also Norma is going to talk about the power of emotion this morning. So really looking forward to that as well. But before I hand over to David, let me just quickly say, goeiemorgen, Ben and Tracy. Awesome to see you. Govendra, good morning. I've got Paula, good morning. Razan, good morning. I hope that's a hot cup of coffee. And yes, Paula, you are absolutely right. Albert, good morning. Nice to meet you. Mr. Mark Lane, good morning. And hope you're well down in Melbourne. And thank you very much for joining us. All right, so with that, let's head on over to the new studio and hear what Mr. David Kopp has to share with us this morning.
Good morning, everyone. And in the news today, who wants to be a trillionaire? Work flexibility over pay, top skills for financial advisors, and then lastly, what do cheese and prunes have in common? So the rumors are true. Absa and Sanlam have joined to create one of the largest asset managers in the country with assets under management in excess of 1 trillion. Absa will exchange its investment business for a stake of up to 17.5% in the asset management company Sanlam created with African Rainbow Capital called Sanlam Investment Holdings Proprietary Limited. Sanlam prides itself on having a leading investment business at our core to ensure that we deliver superb returns to all our customers. We are confident that this transaction will strengthen our ability to deliver investment excellence for customers through our ability to further invest in the business, said Sanlam Group CEO Paul Hanratty. Absa Interim CEO Jason Quinn said that the transaction will help the bank create deeper, broader range of investment solutions for its clients. Then, International Workplace Group research shows that 75% of office workers would prefer long-term flexibility over where they're based to extra money, while 2/3 would not apply for a new job unless it included a hybrid working. So new research from IWG shows that the pandemic has had such an effect on employees' priorities, they would forego a 10% pay rise for flexible working. So how does this impact on our financial planning? Offices from home, clients no longer commuting and spending their money on commuting and have extra money for their goals. So very interesting to see that. Then top skills for financial advisors. The Financial Planning Standards Board, the owner of the International Certified Financial Planner Certification Program outside of the United States, has released the results of the Future of Financial Planning Practice Research. It's a survey of 4,250 certified financial planning professionals across 23 territories, conducted in partnership with the FPSB network. The key findings were technology is expected to enhance the practice of financial planning as opposed to being a threat. Financial planning relationships shift towards collaboration, and financial planners are embracing these softer skills. The public demand for financial planning will increase, driven by retirement needs, and raising awareness about the value of financial planning and rebuilding trust will be key to engaging with the public. So if you want to know more, you can look at fpsb.org, and also to celebrate World Financial Planning Day on Wednesday, there is a webinar on their YouTube panel where more of this research is unpacked. Today also marks the end of the FPI Financial Planning Week, where we have run a social media campaign to raise awareness about the benefits of financial planning and working with a financial planner. The tips were provided by FPI professional members along the theme of live your today and plan your tomorrow. And then to end it off, cheese and prunes. Okay, everyone who's having a photo taken nowadays is told to say cheese so we can get that lovely smile on our face. But Britain's first portrait photographer, Richard Beard, reportedly asked his subjects to say prunes in order to get the best image while working in the 1840s. The dour look on their faces may certainly reflect a lot of our feelings about the dried fruit, but he wasn't asking them to say it just to put them in a bad mood. Instead, Beard was trying to ensure that their mouths looked as small and as refined as possible. Apparently, it was bad form to look jolly or happy in the Victorian era. Etiquette codes of the past demanded that the mouth be carefully controlled, explained an historian. And apparently as well, if you were smiling in a photo, you were either crazy or drunk. So how times have changed. And Francois, back to you in the studio.
Yeah, absolutely. And lucky for that. I don't think I would have made it then back then. I first thought in my head now, but I was in totally the wrong era. I went like, but those were the era of swords and beheadings and hangings. Why would you want to smile? And then I thought, no, wrong era, Francois, wrong era. So awesome. David, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Francois. You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye. All right. Yeah, always time for a little laugh on this show, which is what makes it so fun. Anyway, so with that, now it is time to head on over to Norma and to listen what she has to say about the power of emotion.
Good morning, and good morning to everyone, and Francois and the rest of the team. Yes, we're talking about power of emotion today, and I think this is maybe a tool that we have that's available to us, but sometimes we forget about it. And I think it's very important because a lot of times we sit down to work on our goals, and then this feeling comes up, maybe confusion or not feeling like doing the specific task that we are busy with or need to do. And then we just decide to give it up or do something to distract ourselves or do something that it's much easier than this thing that's waiting for us to do. So if we can create our emotions, then we'll see that we can get to our goals so much easier. So what is power of emotion? It's really our emotions are driven by, or is fueled rather by our actions. So our emotions really create our actions, and our thinking really creates our emotions. So if we have the right emotion, then we'll be able to take action from there. So it's like a car. If we put good fuel in that car, it will run well. But if there's no fuel in that car, it will basically stop. Nothing will be happening. So I think we have this maybe wait and see approach sometimes, where we know maybe a conversation is waiting, or we know we need to do the specific thing to get closer to our goals, but we sort of wait and see. So we wait and see when I get to that point where I need to do that thing, wait and see what emotion will be coming up. And a lot of the times it's not an emotion that really drives us to take action. So where does our fuel then come from? So the same as with a car, if we have to go to a garage and we have to ask for fuel, a specific type of fuel, we pay the attendant and then we get the fuel and we can go. So the same is with us as well. And in our lives, we have to set up and sort of in advance decide what emotions we need in order to do a specific task. So we have to learn then to generate emotions. And then also we have to take responsibility for those emotions. So when we are working on a goal, for instance, we know that we need to generate positive emotions to get us going. But then in the process, obviously, those negative emotions will also be coming up. So if we're working on a goal, we're doing something new we haven't done before, obviously those things like self-doubt or maybe disappointment or discouragement or maybe low confidence will be coming up. And we know that's part of life, that's part of the 50-50. So we have to embrace those discomforts as well. And then we know that we can decide to have an emotion that we want, and we can actually feel it on purpose. So a lot of times we actually also choose to have emotions that is really not really serving us. And those I call indulgent emotions. So those can be like something like confusion or overwhelm or boredom or worry or just emotional exhaustion. So there's really no upside to those emotions, and it's really just prevents us from moving forward. So it's like filling our tank with water, for instance. It's really not useful at all. So we can really just eliminate those emotions from our lives, because it's really just a bad habit. It just keeps our minds busy, and it leads to us not being very productive. We can also think of emotions as an ingredient to our results. So just think in the last week, for instance, if where you had a productive couple of hours or even a productive day, what was the overwhelming or the majority feelings that you had during that day or during that period? So my guess is it would be something like commitment or motivation or inspiration or being energized. Now think of this last week where you went through a period where you were very unproductive and you didn't actually get done what you set out to do. So my guess is there that you felt maybe things like frustration or overwhelm or not being very motivated. So you can see what emotions does to us and to our goals. So how does emotions happen? We create it. So we need to ahead of time decide, this is the task that I need to do, and what is the emotion that's going to drive that task. So how do we pick emotions and how do we practice them? So we use emotions as a tool to really create what we want. So if we learn how to feel an emotion in our body and we can describe it, then we can really call on that emotion at any time. And we can think a thought that's going to create that emotion that will drive the actions that we need to take to then get closer to our goals. Okay, so that's really powerful stuff. And I hope you can use that in your life. If you have any more questions about that, you're welcome to get hold of me. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. And yeah, that's what I have for you today. And I'll be back next week. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Norma. Really appreciate it. And have a lovely weekend, and stay safe and stay dry, I suppose, this weekend. So yeah, enjoy. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, and have a good weekend, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. All right. So with that, we get ready to get into our featured discussion this morning with Hugo van Zyl. And really looking forward to this. And I was just been sort of glancing through some of the things. And you can also refer back to season 2, episode 11, when Hugo was also on. It's a whole, 20 episodes ago. That means 20 weeks ago. We touched on the exchange control changes and some tax changes that was announced. So there was also a discussion on that. And I'll chat to Hugo in a second, because there were some interesting things that happened off the back of that. But apart from that, today, we really want to focus on the retirement funds, but also I want to encourage you to please ask questions. If you have any questions around this or anything else for that matter that touches immigration and tax and all of those good things, please put them down in the comments section or the chat. I'll be able to then relay them over to Hugo as well. So that's also going to be part of this morning. We will answer some questions live. So hopefully you're going to send us lots of questions, because there should be a lot of questions around this topic. But before I waffle on too long, let me first welcome Hugo van Zyl, and let's head on over to him. Good morning, Hugo.
Good morning from Dubai, Francois. How are you?
Yeah, I'm extremely good. How are you over in Dubai?
Well, it's already 38 degrees and it's 9 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. But again, it's Friday. It's our first day of the weekend. So I'm off to a birthday party. So my office job will stop at 10 o'clock our time, 8 o'clock your time.
Yes, fantastic. So once you're done with the show, basically, you're off. Nice. Hugo, just thanks a lot for your time. I really appreciate it. and really excited just to get into today's topic, because I've had these conversations with quite a few people. But maybe just before, there is possibly people that's watching this for the first time. So before I just dive into the topic, maybe just quickly, who is Hugo van Zyl? What is it that Hugo does? And then we can look at the rest of the conversation.
Thank you, Francois. My trade name outside South Africa for the expats is Wegkaner, away African. And it was a name given to me at the Afrikaans Festival in London way back in 2001, the first time I started speaking about expat tax. And who knows and who remembers that on the 1st of October, capital gains tax was 20 years old. SARS made the big spiel that on the 30th of September, VAT was 30 years old, and made no comment on the fact that we're now in the 21st year of capital gains tax. And very important, this new exit tax on pension funds is double the 18% capital gains tax. It's 36%. So it's a little bit worse off than capital gains tax.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think that's something that nobody really saw coming, because that only came to the fore, like, you know, when things really got announced. It was just like, oh, now you have to wait 3 years and da-da-da. And then this thing came about, like the exit tax that you need to pay. And I think what's even sort of worse for me was the fact that there was this deemed tax, you know, and it is sort of whether you took the money or not. That was the big thing, because usually in the past, you only pay tax once you cash in your retirement fund. Now you leave, whether you like it or not, there's the tax.
And important, the law says it's a deemed retrenchment, which means you get a 25,000 Rand exemption only.
Very clever. Very, very. I won't use the word sneaky, but I mean, it is bad. And I think as you've alluded to it, you know, it's double the 18% capital gains tax, exit tax as we called it. So yeah, let's get into it, Hugo. I mean, maybe just as a refresher, what does the law say at this point? If somebody has emigrated, they want to cash out their retirement funds, that has changed now to that 3-year waiting period. What is that all about? How does it work? Just to set the scene.
Okay. So the 3-year rule speaks to retirement annuities and the preservation funds where you took one withdrawal. Those old rules where if you wanted to cash out before a retirement date, in the old days we had to do a 14 cap C transfer. Those retirement funds, at the moment, instead of doing formal immigration or financial immigration, that's switched off. We now have to be out of South Africa 3 or more tax years, and then you can cash out. So there's a waiting period, and that's where the trigger starts, because now a client would ask me, should I put on record my tax immigration as soon as possible? And I say yes, because we need that 3 years to start ticking. But from 1st of March, by doing that, you also ticked off this exit tax on the retirement annuities that you were not able to cash out, plus the preservation funds that you are able to cash out, plus the provident funds that you were able to cash out, but you did not. So this is the conundrum we sit in, is because of this tax, should I leave my RAs for 3 years and then cash out all the other retirement funds? And then I have this big question. How can SARS, on the one end, want to tax me on the 1st of March, immediately, but for me to cash out, to stop this tax and the interest on that notional tax of 7% interest, why must I wait 3 years for certain funds? There's a little bit of an unfairness. And then you said the word sneaky. I see in the formal presentations that PwC and a few others made to the Standing Committee on Finance and on the National Treasury workshops, they actually questioned whether it's constitutional. I'm not a lawyer, but they argued that in terms of the double tax treaties, it could be considered as unconstitutional. I'm not a lawyer, can't comment, but I thought it was an interesting comment from them.
Yeah, because, I mean, that was the other interesting thing to me, is that usually you would actually sort of, because if you've been out of the country for 3 years, or, you know, you haven't been here, now this rule came in, with most other things, you should be able to rely on a double taxation agreement if one exists. And it does provide a lot of relief in that instance. But that does not apply to retirement funds. They specifically do this, like, you know, before that could apply. Am I right in saying that?
So it's to actually prevent, for example, looking at someone going to Australia. If you're in Australia and you receive a living annuity annually, in terms of the double tax treaty, in 80% of the cases, only Australia can tax you, and South Africa has to issue an exemption certificate for the pay-as-you-earn. And that's now what SARS tried to overcome by saying the day before you have left, we deem you to be retrenched, and therefore we can collect the tax. But interesting, as you mentioned earlier, it's not a collection against the fund. If you had R1 million there, and let's say this is your second million, so you're at the flat 36% level. Then they're going to note the 36% tax, but they're not going to cash it. So they leave that fund, that tax with the fund. But now you can't cash that out because it's a retirement annuity for 3 years. So for 3 years, they're now going to add a 7% tax on a notional tax. How constitutional is that? Because if you look at the Tax Administration Act, there's only interest on tax due. Let's take a practical example. I pay provisional tax August and February. But actually, that August tax is notionally for March, April, May. There's no interest as of March or April. It's only on the 1st of September when I'm late. There's a penalty, and then the interest starts. Although it's the tax for March, the interest only starts on the day I had a cash liability. Now SARS is saying, no, but for the exit tax on retirement funds, we'll start that interest on the March notional amount. And that's the Tax Administration Act doesn't even allow for that, as it stands at the moment.
That was the big thing that jumped out at me. Is like, how do you charge? So I'm not allowed to take it. But is there an option? So let me just ask it this way. So is there an option for me to actually go and pay the tax? It's not that, once I'm assessed and they say, well, you need to pay, whatever that amount is. Am I actually able to go and pay it cash immediately? Or do you have to wait for the retirement fund to cash out?
You have to wait. And then the interesting rule is on your immigration date, they do a notional calculation, and that is noted, and the interest is calculated on that. The day that you actually then cash it out, they recalculate, okay? And then there's an additional tax or a new calculation, and then they give you credit for the previous calculation. Now, how can they give you a credit for a tax you haven't paid? So it's a little bit of the mechanics of this law is very, very interesting because in the drafting, very, very vague. So we assume that what they're going to say is that if you had, let's take that R1 million, so it was 360,000 that you had to pay. When you retire now and physically cash out, say it's now 2 million, then it's 720. So then it's 360, no credit for the interest, and then they collect another 360 or calculate the 360, and then they collect the 720. But what is worrying on that one at the moment, and when I made previous comments about how system problems work at SARS, we had some interesting emails from SARS. But at the moment, we've just seen it now. I had a client that retired from his preservation fund. Okay. Now he is 3 years out of South Africa, but he's not yet 65, the date that his retirement dates for retirement annuities. So that was recorded as a resignation. What happened is that when he cashed out his preservation fund, and he actually physically retired from them, so he got a 500,000 Rand exemption. Now when the retirement annuity came, he took a lump sum. So now it calculated a tax exemption on 25,000 Rand. Interesting, the system went and not yet assessed. Maybe they'll fix it on assessment, but the directive that was issued makes no sense. We can't calculate it. When I then went back and try and reconcile it, it appears at this stage that they have reversed the 500,000 exemption because now the system sees this person as resigned. So they treat the first amount as a resignation, although it was retirement. So now he's paying tax on the million that he's now taking from the retirement annuity and 36% on 475,000 that was previously exempt because the system now sees this person as a resignation, not as a retiree. And whether it was just on the directive, I don't know. Hopefully on assessment, it will be fixed. And this could happen next year when we're on this new system. So the system is not geared for the law yet.
Yeah. And I mean, you made an interesting point to say, the legislation is very vague, and that's what I get from everybody, is to say, what, nobody knows. And I think where we see it the best, apart from the fact that, I mean, you deal with these things on a daily or weekly or monthly basis at least, is that the way that insurers and investment houses go is about applying this when you send them the application to cash in your retirement annuity, because nobody's have the same requirements. They apply the law differently. And I think that is a very clear indication that just how vague this whole thing is.
Francois, what is frustrating is two of the very big ones have added most recently that they want a tax opinion, a Section 223 opinion, which is going to cost the average guy 50 to 120 to 225,000 Rand, okay? Where the SARS system, if you go to their page, they only need the tax domicile or tax residency certificate from another country. Now they want a tax opinion. I don't mind. I'm making the money, but I just feel sorry for the guy. His pension fund is only 400,000. Now you must pay me 75,000 for a tax opinion. Why so expensive? I am at risk, because if that opinion doesn't stand by the time he retires or cash out, SARS is going to report me to my professional body. So I have to take into account my risk. So yes, there could be an argument. Many of these opinions are templates. It's not really, because every country's treaty is different. But first of all, I have to quantify my risk.
Yeah. And, it's these kind of things where, I can understand that SARS is trying to sort of plug the holes that exist when people do leave and they do immigrate, and maybe the concept of this sounded sound, I would say, at the time when this was decided, but now it's the implementation part of it, I think, that is causing a lot of issues. And the other question then around the 3 years having to be out of the country, there are many people who've been working outside of South Africa for longer than 3 years, 10 years, 15 years, 8 years, whatever. And they haven't been back. They haven't come back. They don't have plans to come back, but they haven't gone through any formal process or anything like that. Can we just touch on that again? Like, what is the rule when we talk about in terms of RAs, but also in terms of tax residency? So, what is required for you? Because is this about your tax residency ending, and then it has to have ended for 3 years, or is it about the immigration part? Like where is the focus for this 3 years?
The absolute focus is ceasing tax residency in terms of our act. But what I just want to quickly point out, so this new exit tax on the retirement funds, as you know, is a tax proposal. The law is very vague. It says the effective date is 1 March. It does not state people that immigrated as of the 1st of March next year. So at the moment, to start at the back end, we don't know if it's going to be, if someone comes to me and I then file his 2022 tax return, and I then state he has tax immigrated but 3 years back, so I do a VDP, backdated, will they be subject to this exit tax on retirement funds? Or will it be only people who physically left on the 1st of March? I don't have the answer. But to come back on your question, this 3 years speaks purely to ceasing of tax resident status, either in terms of a treaty or the 330-day test, or in terms of no longer being ordinarily resident. So for people that left many years ago, it is relatively easy because they're normally in a treaty country, and we just submit the tax residency certificate or the tax domicile certificate or the certificate of residence, depending what your country calls it. If that is then backdated to 3 years, and you can show that, then you've been out 3 tax years. But be mindful that in the tax return for 2021, for the first time, they asked the question, did you tax immigrate or cease to be a tax resident this or any previous year? If you tick any previous year, you must be sure that there's no exit tax in that 4 or 5 tax years ago when you physically left South Africa. So it is important. You don't need to financially immigrate. You don't need to redo that. You actually just have to show that you have been out 3 years and being non-resident at SARS level. So here comes the complication. The people that did the formal immigration have actually on paper wasted their money, because what SARS is now doing, they are the funds, they now do not recognize that formal immigration, because remember, it's not a tax system. They now still ask you for a tax residency certificate, backdated to 3 years, plus one in the current year. And now SARS says those residency certificates must be less than 6 months old. So you can't just use the one that was issued to you in 2016. You have to reapply in 2021 for a 2016 one, which I think is very unfair. But now the onus is on you to show that you became tax non-resident in 2017 tax year or 2016 tax year or 2018, because that gives you the 3 years until the end of 2021. The also important part is if you cease to be tax resident on the ordinarily no longer resident test, it's far more complicated. You really have to do that declaration, the manual process first, to make sure that SARS agrees with you. And then you can give that to the fund. But that's now where the 2 bigger funds says, there's no fixed rules on the interpretation so wide on ordinarily resident. We now want a tax opinion over and above the certificate from SARS to confirm that they have acknowledged you as tax non-resident. And that's people in Panama, Bahrain. So it's popular countries that, and Philippines. So I have in Indonesia. So we have people that are really living in interesting countries and popular countries at the moment.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And I'm not standing here wondering, and I mean, we can only speculate. I don't think one would really know. So I don't want another email coming through from SARS on questions I ask. But so because there's a lot of people who previously could not take out their retirement funds, they were maybe not that bothered to really emigrate and do things because of the double taxation agreement. But now there's maybe a big amount of money that's sitting there that they can get. Do you if we can also keep on speculating, was it purely meant to yes, you can take your money, but now you have to wait 3 years and you can get it from your RAs and everything. Now it's not only your preservation or your pension fund, but now where you could have gotten that immediately, you need to wait 3 years before you can. Was that also a mechanism to trigger people to actually, cease their tax residency in order to also trigger the exit tax?
Well, to quote National Treasury in the 2020 public hearings, no, their intention for the 3 years was to make sure people don't artificially tax immigrate to cash in their RAs and retirement funds. So what is happening now already, we saw the Business Tech article the other day about all the employees, specifically teachers, resigning to cash out their pension funds and retirement funds that are part of the old rules before 1st of March, which they can cash out, to stop that process. That's why they wanted the 3-year process. So, but that's what's the official opinion. I think me and a lot of people in the industry feel that it's their way to collect cash. So my personal feeling is they did not realize that the expat tax is not going to bring in the amount of money they thought. Now we're on plan B, but officially they deny that.
Yeah. And it is one of those things. I mean, they're also a business, if you will, looking at what we can do and yeah. So
can I just interrupt you? There is a big problem, and I want the people from ASISA and so on to stand with the tax practitioners fighting this. Okay, there's one thing about tax collection, but I've been criticized the other day publicly, and I take it because what I'm saying may be wrong from a financial or retirement planning point of view. My opinion comes from a pure tax opinion. Okay, they are hurting the fund industry. And I'm going to repeat what I said on LinkedIn, which I got so much criticism for. If a youngster sits in front of me, he is 27 years old. He's just qualified as a doctorate in science, and he now has to work back 5 years for the company that provided him the bursary. And the question now to me is, the pension fund is not that attractive at this organization. Should I put more money into a retirement annuity? My first question will be, do you think after 5 years that you will continue to be employed in South Africa? Is our industry big enough for you to stay put? If he has any doubt, I'm going to say to him, don't go into a retirement annuity because the tax is punitive. It's 36% at maximum rate. Rather go into a unit trust or discretionary fund and take the 18%. I know capital gains tax may then be 22 or 23, but probably not 36%. So if a youngster sits in front of me and he has no certainty that he will remain in South Africa forever and going to retire in South Africa without going out of the country, I can't encourage him to go into a retirement annuity because first of all, he's going to be stuck for 3 years. He's going to pay a tax at 36%, which he has no control over. And if he comes back because he just went over for 3 or 4 years to do another doctorate or something in America, then sadly, we don't know how they're going to reverse that because there's nothing in the act to say how we reverse it when you come back to South Africa. So I'm unfortunately not the biggest fan of funds at the moment from a pure tax perspective. I agree, it's maybe not correct from the retirement annuity or retirement planning because you need to retire and you need to plan. But I'm just questioning whether retirement annuity is still the answer for the diasporic South Africans.
And I mean, it makes sense what you're saying. Like, you have to consider those kind of things, like what happens. And here's my question then. So does it work then this way that the moment that I seize my tax residency, so look, as long as I don't seize my tax, I go and work overseas for 4 years, my plan is to come back. I don't want to, but now, I mean, you said there were 3 ways that I do sort of, and double taxation agreement is one of them. So even that 3 or 4 years, I want to say I don't need to pay tax because of the DTA. Will that DTA then, I mean, is that a trigger then for my tax residency to seize? And then if that happens, does that mean that I immediately, there will be deemed tax on my RAs, whether I wanted to take them out or not?
Yep.
So that happens as part of the exit tax.
Yeah, it's a deemed provision. And very important is that treaties have the word "you shall be deemed." So the minute you apply a treaty, so if you now for expat tax claim a certain benefit in the treaty, you may trigger deemed immigration because now you're deemed to be tax resident of a foreign country. So it's a very interesting conundrum that you sit with. If you apply that treaty in any way, you put yourself 100% in the treaty, then it's a deemed exit, and then you aren't. So what happens now is, this is the practical solutions. And I must compliment the first one who actually identified it for me was Kobus Klein, and I don't know if he's listening today. We have a shared client that is planning to go to America in due course. And now comes the interesting question, could we delay that tax immigration so that he doesn't trigger this exit tax? And my answer was, yes, you can. But now remember, then you can't claim the 1.25 million. You can only claim 1.25 million expat tax exemption. Okay, only 1.25 million. This client is going on an EB5, which tells you he's a high income earner. He's got lots of money because he bought his investment visa. Okay, so he's earning 5-6 million rand a year. So he either pays expat tax at 45% above 1.25 million, or he pays notional tax and waits 3 years before he can cash out his RA. So that's a very difficult, and how do you give financial advice? How do the financial planners then give advice? And that's why I come in very clear-cut, critical tax advice, and I say, you know what, the expat tax, 45% is more than the 36% on the retirement fund. I would rather tax immigrate and save the expat tax. And then sadly for you, I'm saying to you, the day, 3 years and 1 day, just cash out that RA, get that money out of the country, because you cannot now claim the treaty. Because let's just go a little bit practical. America is not so easy. Let's look at Australia. In terms of the Australian-South African tax treaty, if you're Australian permanent resident, then only Australia may tax your living annuity, the annual amount. Now just think about it. You have just, let's have R1 million and say that's the second million. So you're at the flat 36%. You now have that amount taxed the day you left at 36%, but it's notional. It's a little note there that 1 million has now been reduced by 360,000 plus 7% per year. So 21% by the time that you can cash it out. Australia now says, they first of all going to tax you on the market value, not net of tax, the market value of the fund the day you left, to the market value, not net of tax, the market value the day you retired or cashed out. So first of all, they're going to tax you for that growth. If you do not take a lump sum, if you retire from that fund and you now have, you take 1/3 commutation, that only South Africa can tax. The treaty is very clear, but now the annual living annuity, now South Africa has no right to tax. But South Africa upfront took this 36% flat tax. Now that monthly or annual living annuity that goes out to Australia, in our law, is after tax. Australia does not acknowledge that because you paid that way back. Remember, you only paid it cash in year 4, but it was incurred the day before you left South Africa. So Australia has no obligation to give you a tax credit. We don't know how they're going to treat it. I assume they're going to not give you that tax credit, which means that after-tax living annuity that you're getting, okay, is now again taxed in Australia at 40% plus 5% Medicare, another 45%. So your 74% left is now taxed again at 40%. Totally unfair. One of the things that in my proposal to National Treasury is that if they want to bring in this tax, they'll have to change that retirement annuity then to an endowment, okay? So that it tax out as a lump sum and it's after tax and Australia can't tax it, okay? Because you cannot have an after-tax living annuity. In our law, it doesn't exist. Remember, what is the principle of a pension fund or retirement fund? It's never taxed. It goes in pre-tax and with a deduction. There's no fund, 4-fund or 5-fund taxing inside. There's absolute no tax supposed to be. So in effect, I'm thinking National Treasury, and this is where PwC's argument is so correct, they're going against the integrity of a retirement fund that should be a tax-free fund. They're now dipping into a supposed to be tax-free fund. So it's a very technical issue. I hope I explained it, but yeah, there's a problem for my clients in UK, Australia, New Zealand, and to a little extent, America.
So now, you mentioned the living annuity, right? Which is obviously a product where I get my pension from once I've retired from my retirement fund. So are they also in scope for this? Like if I leave?
It's all retirement funds. That's why I kept on using the word retirement funds. So it's your preservation funds, your provident funds, those who have not cashed in on those that they can cash on. Remember the old provident funds that you can cash out. Okay. So let's take the provident funds. Current rule is that provident fund, if I retire from it, I can take the lump sum and have the 500,000 exemption because that's retirement from that fund. That's the old rules. Okay. But now interesting is that if you have not cashed that out before the 1st of March, it's a deemed retrenchment. Now the 500,000 is lost. There's no clarity in the law what happens to the old provident funds. Remember when the 1st of March, your rights were entrenched and protected, so-called protected. Now suddenly the tax law ignores that. So my answer to people asking me, I have a provident fund, old rules, and often the big companies have, a lot of the listed companies have then moved away from the provident funds, left that one intact, and started a new fund. That provident fund, if you're over 55, I would cash it out so that you can get the 500,000 before 1 March.
Yeah, it's a very technical thing. This and so, is there any way that one could make this easier on yourself? So, if you put yourself in the shoes, yourself in the shoes of a financial planner, a financial advisor, having to be the one to provide these services, often to get these things done and to send the instructions through. Is there sort of a checklist available, or where do we go to sort of create one to say, well, these are all the things that we need. These are all the things that needs to be in place. Does something like that exist at this point, or because of all the uncertainty?
It's a very good idea, and maybe we must sit together, the financial planners and retirement planners and us tax gurus, because the interesting part is, remember, you now have the rules of funds before 1 March, because those rules changed. They had the green paper that was announced and then within 3 weeks withdrawn. So we don't know where that green paper proposals are going. Plus we have tax proposals. So even if it's a tick list, it's something that must be very dynamic because we must continue and very important, it must have input from the financial planners, the fund managers. So I think there's a big role for the people like ASISA, Tax Institute of the Institute of Tax Professionals, SAICA, SAIPA, and then I don't know if the fund managers have a group of their own. So I think it's a good suggestion to have that tick list, but there will be so many issues because, one of the other things, just to go back to exchange control now, the benefit of having tax immigrated now, okay? Remember the blocked fund approach is gone, okay? So if you have tax immigrated, if you have a pension fund monthly coming out, living annuity, once a year, quarterly, half year, doesn't matter. If you get a pure TCS good standing, that one that you do now and you get it tomorrow morning, the quick one, you can send that money out of South Africa over and above your 10 million. Okay. So there's also one of the questions that one of the financial planners said to me the other day, but shouldn't my client then now start retiring and take the living annuity so that we can just use the new exchange control because he needs the money that side to live on? And we did a what if tax calculation. And I remember it's probably a year back, the first one that actually alluded me to that was Russell Ho. When you plan for people to pre-immigrate, we can't just look on the South African tax. We had to look at the Australian tax, I think it was Australia, and see what was the overall tax. So in South Africa, remember the double tax treaty says no income, no tax on that post-retirement income. So in South Africa, it doesn't matter. The exchange control was about to change. We knew the rules can allow them to take it out. But we had to ask the Australians to do a what-if tax calculation. So it turned out, because that person is going to Australia on an investor visa and not having a salary that side, his tax rate that side would be less than 20%. So it's better to take an annual amount because he's taxed at less than 20%. If he cashed out lump sum, then it would be 36% flat rate. The what-if is the exchange rate, because we knew if you took the lump sum, it was 36%, and we knew what the Rand exchange rate was. I don't know what that client did, but remember the Rand recovered post-COVID-19. So January, February, the Rand started recovering, not so much against the Australian dollar, but against the American dollar. So there's so many factors, it's not just the tax in South Africa. So that client, I think got excellent advice because it was the global tax that needs to be considered. So that tick list of yours, the big question will be, how will your new tax home tax you on South African funds?
Yeah, it's important to understand that. And I think that's often what I know we spoke about this, I think way back on the podcast, when you came on the podcast the first time, like 2 years ago. I think one of the things we spoke about is that when people leave, they do not consider what the tax is on that side. They only tend to look at it in South Africa. What happens here? What tax do I do? How do I not pay tax here? But they have no understanding of the tax of the country where they go to. They may know, oh, maximum, there's maximum, but what actually happens when you go there, and then they only really start becoming aware of that once they land that side. And then it's like, oh, okay, maybe some decisions were not as great as I thought because I did not know what was going to happen this side.
Francois, can I give you examples
Yeah.
outside of this topic?
Yeah, yeah.
Remember your exit tax, 18%. It's painful. So some guys very cleverly on their own, he admits he had no advice, he decided his own. He then went into a 12J, okay, got 100% deduction against his capital gains tax. And now it's painful in America because they don't treat that as a tax-free amount. So he suddenly faces, and he went into one of those that's now third year, and 2 years from now when he can cash out, currently it's going to be a lot of money. So it was one of the good 12Js, okay? And the Americans has 20% capital gains tax rate. And the other part is now his tax advisor that side said, it's not really a capital investment. You went in for the profit. His intention was to speculate. So there's no absolute certainty that America is not going to tax him at 35%. So, what was the benefit? And as you now know, the rand is relatively strong at the moment, so that also plays a role. But all he did was defer it, and now suddenly the big problem is the tax is payable in America, the money sits in South Africa, and he could be technically bankrupt in America because that tax amount can be so big, it's going to wipe out his investments in America.
Yeah, but I mean, that's such an interesting thing because, I think one thing we need to realize is that just because we define something to be capital and something to be income, because, every country would look at behavior, intent, those kind of things as a principle, that it's not to say that because it's capital in South Africa, it is capital in America. Yeah. They look at it very differently. And that's something that we also need to be aware of. That's what happened here. Is that there's a different way that they treat it. They say, no, you're in it for the profit, as you said, and which is true. In South Africa, the law says specifically there will be capital gains tax on exit of that 12J. So, there won't be anything else. But, it's such a minefield, Hugo. So my question then is, I don't know. So we don't have a checklist, but we would like a checklist. But we don't know how easy it would be to make a checklist like that. I think that's sort of what I got from this. But then, should you attempt to help clients yourself, or are there other people that you should rather be using that sort of knows it and have the context at SARS and everywhere where it needs to be, and also have an understanding of what happens on the other side? I don't know, in your opinion, what is a prudent approach?
So my approach is at least 2 people, and the one is your tax advisor and the one is your financial planner, because I, for example, can't provide financial planning. And then, the interesting thing which Russell Ho taught us is that you must also speak to the financial advisor on the other side. So maybe 6 eyes, so it's a team effort. There is also now a product in the market where you can do a simulated tax directive from SARS. It's a very nice product. I can't use it because at the moment they restrict it only to people with license. They check your license against as a financial planner. But that then actually goes to SARS to see if you've had your 500,000 used and what would be your aggregate average tax rate and so on. So we do a lot of what-if calculations. The team then in South Africa, me and the financial planner, do the what-if calculations. Then we send it to the foreign guy and say, please, from your perspective, what if we cash out, how will you tax it? What if we don't cash it out? So, for example, in Australia, one of my clients at the moment came back, or his advisor in Australia came back and said to me, the nice thing is that there's no big tax advantage in Australia for cashing in South Africa and taking the money out. But there's an interesting advantage that they can put into the self-managed super, a bullet payment in the first 6 months after arriving. So you can boost up. So if that person is less than 60 years old and there's still some time to retirement, maybe just take that after tax, bump it into the self-managed super, because there they tax it at flat 15%. And when you retire, retirement funds there is tax-free. Okay, that fund pays the tax of 15%, unlike in South Africa where the fund is exempt. So in Australia, the fund pays 15% when you get it out. it's tax-free. We didn't know that. Excellent planning. And that's an interesting position. So that client is not too worried about the South African exit tax coming. He'll suffer it because he wants the bullet payment. But the interesting part is that it's only or uniquely to Australia, and the financial advisor clearly said at the bottom, not advisable to someone that's too old, that will not have a time to manage that retirement fund in the foreign country. So it's a team effort. To come back to the simple answer, I would think it's team effort. Unless you are a financial planner who has a tax knowledge, but if you're like me, a tax planner with a tax advisor with no financial planning knowledge or no license, I have to work, and that's where I get my work from. My intermediaries are the team members that I've mentioned, and that I must thank you because I've met all of them through your show. So thanks for that.
No, that's awesome to hear, and that's a massive pleasure, Hugo. I mean, I've when I was in the tax practice before I sort of left that. Once I got to learn about you and got to know you and meet you, and I remember the day I walked up to you at I think it was the FISA meeting and going to introduce myself. I don't know why I was nervous, but you always think yes, Hugo, and he's this. I mean, because you're a big name in tax and you really know your story. But then I met this guy who was just like, you just want to help. And you do it, and you're always willing to sort of do that. And you're professional. You charge your fees. You do that, but never have you said to me no. And if you couldn't help, you've always sent me somewhere that I got help from. So so I think it's something that goes both ways. So it's definitely. I mean, I would highly recommend people contacting you for anything relating to tax. Even sometimes. I mean, I've spoken to you about things other than just immigration. I think your name is definitely linked to immigration in a big regard, but like you also do other tax, I suppose. So any issue.
I still got Tax Forum in South Africa, so yeah. But also, Franco, just as an interesting on a personal note, from my matric year, we had to write something. I have this philosophy in life. In my epitaph one day on my gravestone must just read, "He made a difference." I couldn't give you the answer, but I made a difference. The other side, someone said to me the other day, even your enemies can't argue that one.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Hugo, I don't know, is there anything that we can end off on? Anything else in terms of maybe tax or anything else in general that you would want to share maybe this morning before we finish?
No, just the other important part is, together with the tax, is the exchange control changes has been quite interesting. A lot, and in certain ways, they lifted a lot of rules. But the sad thing, which we discovered in the last 3 weeks, we knew it was coming, but now it's absolutely clear from roughly about mid-September, people that have done financial immigration, you can no longer use the process to release blocked assets because blocked assets no longer exist. So sadly, SARS came back. We did a foreign investment allowance, the 10 million application for someone who did formal immigration. And they came back and they said, no, you have to redo the tax immigration on the new online system. And then the income post-immigration is no longer restricted to South Africa. You can transfer that out. And so that's a little bit painful now. I feel really very sorry for those people. But if you have substantial blocked assets, just take into account it's been unblocked. And then the big difference is those people who had family trust, where dad is still alive, where you previously couldn't take the money out, even if you don't have a bank account in South Africa, we can now get a tax clearance certificate issued by the SARS to the trustees, and then you can take 10 million rand out of South Africa if you do not have an active tax number. If you have a active tax number, a little bit of a different process, but those trust funds are no longer double blocked, as we used to say. But Francois, it's a moving target every day, and thank you for the opportunity. My disclaimer, medium-term budget, I think is now 4 November. We'll only know the final law 4th of November. And I'm still praying that National Treasury listen to us. That threat from certain people on constitutional challenges may just convince them to move this out 1 more year.
Yeah, so let's hold thumbs for that. Hugo, where can people get hold of you or connect with you the easiest?
Okay, so the 2 web pages is wegkaner, W-E-G, then kaner.com, and taxforum.coza, the South African page. And I'm on Twitter and so on as Hugo van Zyl, or Tax Forum or Tax Forum CC, and then at wegkaner. So that's the domain at the bottom of the page. Wonderful. And my diary is online. So even if I'm sleeping and you're in America or somewhere, my diary is open. Anyone can make a booking, and I will adjust to the time zone of the taxpayer.
cool. And then obviously LinkedIn, I guess
that's
people
right.
will find you there as well, because that's where you get a lot of heat for saying things that make sense. All right, so Hugo, thank you so much. I see Jaco van Skalkwyk is asking if the recording will be available. Yes, Jaco, all our shows are always available immediately afterwards on the YouTube channel and also on my LinkedIn profile. So you can definitely find it there, but easiest will probably be on YouTube. I see you were watching on LinkedIn. All right, Hugo, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Go and enjoy that birthday party. And so as long as it's not yours, because that means I would have missed your birthday.
No, it's not.
That has already happened. So, so enjoy. Thank you for your time and for always just being a part of this community and the show. Really appreciate it. We wish you well. And hope to see you again in Cape Town when you're back. And then, yeah, because last time we had a good coffee, you and I.
Only in January, but see you in January. I'll be back in January.
It's like that, brother. It's like that.
Thank you so much. Keep well and enjoy your weekend. Dankie almal.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for today's show. I'm really excited to announce that I'm going to be interviewing the Financial Planner of the Year finalists before they get announced who the winner is. So that's going to be, I'm not sure yet. We're waiting for the dates, either next Friday or the Friday thereafter, but definitely before the FBI convention that takes place the 25th and the 26th of October. All right, so with that, thank you so much for being here today, for joining us live. I always appreciate it. It's so much better live. I don't know if you agree. I hope so. But stay blessed, stay safe, and remember to raise the bar.